got David Wood and Vocab Malone with Acts 17 working together. And I've got a question for you guys. As it relates to apologetics, what about this idea of mockery or satire? Is there ever a place for it in apologetics?
Great question. So satire is only funny, and I would even say effective, if it's based upon some element of truth. So if it's not based upon something that's actually true, then it's just pure mockery or lampooning for real no reason. Okay. But if it's exposing something that's really true, then it can educate through humor or comedy. So I think we even see this really in the scripture. I'll give you a few examples. Elijah is with the prophets of Baal, and there's a contest really for the heart of Israel there. Will they be idolaters or will they serve Yahweh? And the contest is a very serious matter. It's not a joke. It's very, very serious. And it has to do with which God is going to send fire from heaven. But in the meantime, when the prophets of Baal are cutting themselves and calling upon Baal to answer their calls and their prayers, he does not answer because he's a false god. Yeah. Elijah mocks them and their God. Now he's really showing the insanity of their theology. That's what he's doing. It's not just to mock them, it's to point out how vacuous it is. Yeah. Isaiah does a similar thing in these passages that are sometimes called the Battle of the Gods, where he describes a man chopping down a tree, and part of it he warms himself with the fire, and the other part he carves into a god and prays to it, even though it has no eyes and ears and can't respond to him with its mouth. And Isaiah points out the sheer ludicrous nature of the situation, but he clearly is using satire, you could even say mockery, to make a theological point. Yeah. And he's doing so, I think, as a teaching method. Now, that's not all Elijah and Isaiah did. That's not all we do, but it is certainly one avenue, I think. And I would even say Jesus does it. For example, hey, Herod, you tell that sly fox, yeah. Stuff like that. And so that is, I think, in the apologist toolkit, if they want to use it. It doesn't mean you can go wrong with it, right? But it doesn't mean it's never to be used. And I think there's biblical precedent to use satire and apologetics.
When Nabil and I started out, we liked making skits. We wanted to entertain while making our points. In case you haven't seen some of those early skits, I'll include a couple of links in the description box. Nabil and I had fun making videos like that, but we weren't around each other very much. We were in graduate school in different parts of the country. Then Nabil joined RZIM, where he had to be a bit more serious. And the rest of my friends didn't exactly want to be on YouTube talking about Muhammad. But the ideas kept coming. For years, they kept coming, and they just simmered in my brain, never actually making it to my channel. Now I've got some graphics guys and editors, and I finally found a few funny individuals who want to do skits and who understand the risks of messing with jihadis and who want to do it anyway. We're recording a 30-day series called ISLAMICIZE Me. If you recall, back in 2004, there was a documentary called Size Me, where Morgan Spurlock ate nothing but fast food for 30 days straight and shared the physical and psychological impact it had on him. Pretty cool way to make a point, right? Now, imagine a few young men who agree to live according to the teachings of Muhammad for 30 days in order to understand the physical and psychological impact it will have on them. But they don't just follow the commands that have become popular, like praying 5 times a day and taking the Hajj. They follow everything Muhammad said. They dunk diseased flies in their food because Muhammad said to do it. They drink water from a pool that has dead animals floating in it because Muhammad said it's safe. They sleep with prostitutes because Muhammad said it's okay. When they get a stomach ache, they drink camel urine because that's the cure for stomach problems, according to Muhammad. They eventually decide to wage jihad because Muhammad said it's the best thing in the world. By the end of the 30 days, they have dozens of diseases from prostitutes and flies and dead donkey water. They've been beaten and shot for trying to persecute Jews and Christians and from waging jihad. And we all get to see the impact of really following all of Muhammad's teachings. Turns out it's much, much worse for you than eating McDonald's for a month. And actually seeing the impact in mockumentary fashion will make it stick in people's minds much more than me simply putting the sources on the screen. So be sure to subscribe to the channels of my friends Vocab Malone and Jon McCray. If you don't know them, you'll be getting a proper introduction very soon.
What's Islamicize Me? So Islamicize Me is a project that is the brainchild of David Wood, and this project has been brewing in his brain for a lot of years now. Now, something about this that a lot of people might not know is that we actually constructed this story based off of true events. A few weeks ago, I posted a video of Robert Spencer, and for those that don't know who Robert Spencer is, he's actually one of the world's leading experts on jihad. He's the first person to ever come out with a book giving a comprehensive history of jihad from Muhammad all the way to ISIS. A few years ago, after people were murdered for drawing cartoons of Muhammad, Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller said that they were going to send a message, and that message was, we will not be moved by terrorism. The message that jihadists and terrorists send out is that if you make fun of Muhammad, if you draw pictures of Muhammad, if you criticize Islam, then we're going to kill you. But Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller said, we're not going to be silenced by terrorism. So Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller held a cartoon drawing contest of Muhammad. The message was, you're not going to get special privileges. Everybody's religion gets made fun of in America. So you're just going to have to grow up like the rest of us and learn how to take insults without killing people.
There are a lot of people out there, leftists, keyboard jihadis, and so on, who want to see Robert Spencer dead. There are people who have attempted to kill him.
Is there any remorse whatsoever in the fact that by having this event there simply with the caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, which we know certainly makes some people very angry, that more people might have been killed, that more innocents might have been killed had these officers not done their job well? You could have had dozens of people dead last night.
Ed, your question is predicated on the assumption that I would have been responsible and the other organizers would have been responsible had anybody been killed.
You would not have been responsible?
The reality is that the responsibility would have lain with the killers and only with the killers.
Robert, what did you hope to gain by offering a $10,000 best cartoon depiction of Muhammad contest?
We hoped to gain a general understanding in the West that the freedom of speech was important, was valuable, was worth defending. That the adage, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, is an important foundation of any free society. And that therefore it is imperative that we stand up against violent intimidation, that we refuse to allow ourselves to be silenced by threats, silenced by murder, that we will not be intimidated into silence, but we will continue to speak, because if we allow ourselves to be intimidated into silence, then we are effectively giving the signal that terrorism works. That if you go and murder people, then you can get them to do what you want, get the survivors to do what you want.
Let's bring this up then.
That would end up with a rule of murder.
One of the reasons why I decided to be part of this project is because I completely agree. What's crazy about this story is that Vocab Malone, the other leading actor along with David Wood and myself, actually knew the terrorists that went to go kill Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller.
An evangelical pastor close to Simpson says he was not surprised to hear Simpson's name connected with the Texas terror attack.
He had expressed to me admiration specifically for Osama bin Laden. He used the word hero.
He spent countless hours trying to talk with them about the truth of Jesus and the peace that's to be found in him, but instead became more radicalized because he started hanging out with more and more people who supported jihad. So we decided to call up Robert Spencer and get him involved in the project and make this story loosely based off of that event. But when I say loosely, I do mean loosely. I personally get a lot of nasty comments and messages from Muslims, including death threats. Everybody knows, or at least they should know, that Islam has a disproportional amount of terrorism compared to every other world religion combined. Since 9/11, there's been over 33,000 deadly terrorist attacks inspired by the teachings of Islam. But if Islam truly is a religion of peace and people like Robert Spencer completely misunderstand the teachings of Islam, then why is it that so many other Muslims who decide to kill in the name of Allah also misunderstand it in the exact same way? Why is it that we don't see nearly a proportional amount of these sort of attacks happening in the name of Jesus? When is the last time that you heard someone say Jesus is Lord before they blew themselves up and killed a whole bunch of innocent women and children? People that don't understand terrorism well says every religion has their extremists. I mean, look at the KKK. But what people don't realize is that Christianity is based on the person of Jesus Christ, a person who told everybody to love their enemies. And when Peter pulled out a sword in defense of him, Jesus told him to put his sword away. And this is the same man who was being tortured by his enemies, and he was praying for them as he was dying. If we're not allowed to critique Islam, then we're not going to be able to solve the problem of terrorism. As history has shown us, ignoring the problem will not make it go away. Terrorism will not stop if we just conform and accept the Islamic ideology without questioning it. Terrorism will not stop if we refuse to criticize the Islamic ideology that the jihadists and the terrorists believe gives them a theological license to murder all of us. Now, what we are not saying is that all Muslims are terrorists. Obviously, that's a silly claim. You, me, and probably most of the people that are watching this know somebody that's a Muslim that is against terrorism and is not a violent person. But what we are saying is that the ideology that leads to the terrorism needs to be challenged. And by doing this series, we hope that some people who are thinking about joining ISIS before they get radicalized will see these videos, and then they're going to take a deeper look into the teachings that are found in the Quran and the Hadiths. What's Islamicize Me? So if you haven't seen the documentary Supersize Me, so what it's about is a guy that tries to show the dangerous effects of eating McDonald's every single day for 30 days, and then he documents his journey. And then at the end of the 30 days, the doctor tells him the effect that eating McDonald's for every day for 30 days had on its body. David Wood had an idea to do the same thing, but instead of eating McDonald's for 30 days, he wanted to see the effects on the body that it would have if you followed the teachings of Islam for 30 days. But we're not just talking about the popular ones here, we're talking about the ones that are less than popular. These teachings were straight pulled from the Islamic sources, from the Quran, Sahih Muslim, Sahih Al Bukari. These teachings range anywhere from drinking camel pee to cure sickness, or to dunking flies in your food, from teachings that permit the beating of your wives, from teachings that allow you to marry prostitutes just for the night, and leading all the way up to jihad.
Many of you who've followed the news over the years, you may have witnessed a recurring problem, namely young people convert to a new ideology and then decide to go wage jihad and end up dying while blowing someone up or killing someone. And our friend Vocab actually knew someone who did that. He was friends with a Muslim, a convert to Islam, who went out and died while trying to kill Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller.
Gee, how's our project going to deal with that?
Well, it's pretty simple. When these young guys convert, it's usually for very silly reasons. And then they base their confidence and they have this willingness to go out and sacrifice themselves, and it's all based upon nonsense. So my theory is if we just show them that it's nonsense, well, maybe they won't go out and die for it, and then we'll be saving lives, not just the lives of the people they would be trying to kill, but their own lives. And the idea behind this was based on Morgan Spurlock's documentary Supersize Me, where he spent 30 days eating nothing but McDonald's food and had doctors monitor the impact it had on his body. It took him, I think, 1.5 years to recover from the damage it did to his body. Well, we're looking at things in a slightly different way. We're going to look at the impact following the commands of Muhammad would actually have on a person. And we're going to monitor the results and the impact it has. And so basically it's going to be a similar situation, but we're going to have 3 guys who are challenged to live according to the teachings of Muhammad for 30 days. But it's not just going to be what many people think of as Islam. Oh, they're going to be praying and so on. No, they're going to be drinking water with dead animals floating in it, because Muhammad said water is not made impure by anything. If they get a stomach ache because of that, the solution will be to drink camel urine, because that's what Muhammad said was the solution to stomach ills. They'll be hiring prostitutes and not using protection because Muhammad frowned upon that. And so what's going to happen to these guys over and over again is they're going to catch disease after disease from, dunking flies in their foods and so on, catching diseases from prostitutes, but also the physical toll of if you have your mutta wife, you've hired a prostitute, and then you beat her because she's your wife and you're allowed to beat her, and her pimp shows up to do something about that. Well, these guys are going to run into a lot of problems over these 30 days. And in this particular series, the culminating jihad attack will be an attempt to kill Robert Spencer. We'll see how that ends up going for them. This is when Jesus said to the religious leaders, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel, right? He's mocking them. They would actually strain their water to make sure they didn't accidentally swallow the tiniest of unclean creatures. Jesus is pointing out, you are far more unclean than you are aware of. Yeah. And he's actually mocking them for being so meticulous in what they're doing, while being so unclean in other ways. And so, but if we're talking about something like Islam, and this kind of comes from the biblical principle, because if you look at who the mockery would be directed towards, it's usually not a guy, on the street or something like that. It's usually people who had religious authority over other people and were leading them astray.
Right.
Those were the targets, right? And when I think about that, I think, well, who is that? Well, Muhammad fits that category more than anyone else I can think of in all of history, as far as someone who's leading people down a wrong path. And so if I think if mockery and satire is allowed in the Bible under certain circumstances, then who can you use this with? Well, obviously Muhammad. So I take it as appropriate in certain contexts. If we're talking about Islam in general, I view Islam as not just a religion, but also as a political ideology, which does in fact call for the violent subjugation of the world. And so people think we're really mean when we're using satire or mockery or something like that, dealing with Muhammad. But I regard it as peaceful as we can be, in the sense that if this is not checked, then it leads to inevitable violent conflict down the road. And so I think we should try every peaceful means at our disposal of dealing with an ideology, so that future generations don't have to deal with it, to deal with, World War III or something like that. So if we can deal with it now, I think we need to throw every peaceful means that we have at our disposal at things like this. And hopefully we can deal with it at an ideological level, and we can avoid future violent conflict.
The next time that someone tells you that they haven't heard about Islamicize Me, what are you going to say? What do you mean?